all. Thank you, Dr. Trinath, for the kind introduction about me. And I welcome all the speakers and the participants for this FDP program. So the topic of the day is process metallurgy of non-ferrous metals. So the screen is fully visible, right? Yes. So the process metallurgy of non-ferrous metals. So the outline of the talk would be like this. Where I'll be mentioning about briefly about the definition or what is a non-ferrous metal, and followed by the importance of the non-ferrous metals in the day-to-day life, where they are extensively utilized as a part and parcel of life. And then I will have selected two elements, copper and aluminum, among the non-ferrous metals, which is extensively utilized. So I will mention briefly about the general process metallurgy followed for copper metal as well as the aluminum metal. And after that, I'll be discussing about the current challenges that we are facing, particularly during the processing of metallurgy of non-ferrous metals, and what sort of changes we need in order to improve the process metallurgy efficiency and bring down the cost of the production. And I would like to highlight in detail about the recent advances that are generally that are practiced now in terms of metallurgy of non-ferrous metals, and particularly I'll highlight about the ionic liquids and about deep eutectic solvents, and in particular their application in new concept called solvatometallurgy processes. And overall, I would highlight the general views of non-ferrous metallurgy. In particular, I would like to highlight the underlying principles that we need to know, or that we need to be cautioned when we are choosing some process or materials during processing. So I'll be highlighting the principles or basic things while discussing about each process, and then I would conclude the session. So basically, the metals or any alloy without iron can commonly classify as non-ferrous metals. So there are basic difference between the iron-based material. The main thing is they are very light. For example, aluminum. So which makes it application in light materials like aircrafts and other things. And then there are non-ferrous alloys which are highly conducting, like copper, which are used in wiring and other materials as a conducting medium. And then unlike iron, which gets corroded or rusted easily, there are several corrosion resistant non-ferrous metals. Uh, and then we have materials which are malleable and ductile than iron, like for example, gold, silver, and lead and other things. And then we have high strength materials which are stronger than iron. So in that case, the other like non-ferrous metals are mainly used in several applications, like they are used in lead acid batteries where lead is used, duraluminum or aluminum and used in aircraft products, and then lithium ion battery where the counter ion manganese dioxide manganese is used, and then wiring it is used copper. Then you have aircrafts, ornaments, and old antique jewelries and other idols. They have used bronze, which has other non-ferrous metals as alloy form. So in that way, the non-ferrous metals are in every walks of life, we are just utilizing in one way or the other. Any product which you take, which definitely have some non-ferrous alloy. So in that way, the processing of these materials and separation into pure form, because the property actually changes based on concentration or a percentage which is there in alloy. So in that way, separation of pure element, alloying it and bringing it to the application of our interest is quite challenging, and it is a very scope in day-to-day life activities. Uh, in that way, the metallurgy of non-ferrous metals is very important. However, since there are many non-ferrous metals, I would like to choose two elements, copper metal and aluminum metal, because they find even more extensive application when you compare all other non-ferrous metals. For instance, you take copper, it has antimicrobial activity. So in that way, copper and copper-based alloys are used in healthcare system, where during this COVID-19 situation, healthcare is deemed to be very important topic or relevant to day-to-day life. In that way, copper alloy is used in healthcare systems. And then any household material you take, utensils or vessels, mainly copper bottom vessels are there, and then aluminum pans are there. So in that way, in our household materials, copper and aluminum form integral part. Then you take electronic materials, you take smartphones or printed circuit boards, which is in a CPU, RAM, or any other electronic material. Definitely, copper will be a major component. Then comes the transportation, where the light transport, like flights and engine parts of aircrafts, are mainly made of aluminum and its alloys. Then when you come to electricals connections, usually in household we use copper wires, but at the same time, this copper is little heavy. In that way, high transmission, high voltage lines generally use aluminum cables. So in that way, aluminum and copper are also used in electricals. And when you come for packaging material, aluminum foils are used by us. And then in some places for protection, they use copper plating. So in that way, copper and aluminum are some two elements which are very important. We see daily usage material. So I would like to discuss briefly about the metallurgy or of copper and aluminum. So when you look into the ores of copper, six typical ores are there: copper pyrite, copper glance, malachite green, azurite blue, bornite, and cuprite. So these are the principal ores of copper. So based on the content of copper, it can be divided into high grade ore, copper ore, or a low grade copper ore. And accordingly, they follow different route of processing. I will two processings are there. One is by pyrometallurgy route. The other one is by hydrometallurgy route. In pyrometallurgy route, typically high temperature is involved, where it goes through the 5 processes. The first one is ore concentration, followed by the roasting, then smelting of the ore, and then mesomerization, and finally the 100% pure copper is obtained by refining process, or sometimes by electrorefining processes. So I'll explain in detail about all the 5 processes. The first process would be concentration process. So as we all know that it is basically the concentration of ore, where the humus content, that is the organic components on the soil, or the silica particle sand and unwanted materials are removed, in which the ore which is concentrated. And basically CuFeS2, this copper pyrite ore is sulfide based, and it is concentrated by a Froth flotation process. Generally, sulfide ores are concentrated by Froth flotation process. Why? Because sulfide has more affinity towards organic molecules, uh, like hydrophobic. They are organic molecules. In that way, during Froth flotation process, pine oil is used, which is organic component. So the efficiency of separation concentration process depends on wetting ability. So that means if the ore is wetting nice with your surfactant or your fine oil, then the separation of concentrated ore is efficient. In that way, to improve the efficiency of the Froth flotation process, xanthates are some chemical components which are used, and these xanthates can be sometimes obtained from the waste material of paper industry, so that can be utilized. So that is basically added to improve the concentration process or efficiency or Froth flotation process. After the concentration of ore, the concentrated ore will be going to roasting process, and roasting is done in the presence of oxygen, where several steps are involved. The first steps will be conversion of CuFeS2 into Ce2S and FeS. So that is formation of cuprous sulfide and ferrous sulfide is the first step. And during this step, usually the highly volatile metal like arsenic oxide compounds and antimony oxide compounds are highly volatile. So that means during the first step of roasting, these antimony and arsenic based oxide compounds are mostly removed. So in that way, we are getting rid of this two metal impurities. And the next step would be conversion of Cu2S, cuprous sulfide to cuprous oxide, and then ferrous sulfide to ferrous oxide. And the roasting process is schematically shown here, and the concentration process is schematically shown here. And after the roasting process, the end product would contain Cu2O and FeO, cuprous and iron oxides. And this component will go to the next step, namely smelting. The smelting will be done in a blast furnace, where the step would be conversion of cuprous oxide and iron oxide to uh, Cu2 as cuprous sulfide and FeSiO3. This FeSiO3 is removed as slag, and Cu2S is concentrated in matte. And this matte will go for the Bessemerization process, where the Bessemerization is done in Bessemer converter. But along with Cu2S matte, there is some amount of FeS and sand particles which is present, and these are the impurities which will influence the purity of copper. In that way, in Bessemer converter, these impurities are removed. The first step would be conversion of to sulfate to concerned oxide, and the oxide is again reduced to copper. And this FeS will be converted to FeO, and it will react with sand and removed as FeSiO3. So after the removal of slag, everything which is done here, we will be getting 19% of pure copper, and this copper is called as blister copper. Why? Because it will have some blisters in a solid matrix. The blisters are caused because of the evaporation of SO2 gas. So when there is cooling happening, this gases will come out to the surface and it will burst out. In that way, it will form some blisters, and it is called as blister copper. This blister copper is 99% pure, and this has to be subjected to refining process. In the refining process, basically it is done by electro refining, by the application of voltage and using anode, cathode, and electrolyte. So in that way, electro refining process converts blister copper, that is 99% of pure copper, into 100% of 100% pure copper. And this is done by electro refining process. So this is an electro refining process. Basically, impure metal is taken as the anode. So the blister copper comes into the anode side, and then pure copper will come into the cathode side. And usually a thin pure sheet of copper metal is used as cathode, and the solution will be sulfuric acid, basically with little amount of copper sulfate in order to improve the conductivity of the solution. Little amount of copper sulfate solution in sulfuric acid is used. So during the electrolysis process, what happens is, in the anode, oxidation reduction takes place, and in the cathode, reduction reaction takes place, where the copper will be converted to Cu2 plus, and it goes into the solution. So in that way, oxidation happened, and from there the copper goes to the metal, reduction happens, and Cu2 plus becomes Cu plus. So subsequently, in the course of time, when we pass the electricity, the thickness of cathode plate increases because of deposition, and the thickness of anode plate will reduce because of the leaching out. So after removing the copper and getting deposited into the cathode, the remaining unwanted element, which is 1% of your impurity, will settle down as anode mud. But in terms of copper industry, this anode mud may be a waste material, but it contains other valuable materials also. So in terms of value addition, sometimes this anode mud can be further processed to separate the valuable metals or materials present in the anode mud. So in that way, we can get the ore, high grade ore, converted to 100% pure copper. But this is a metallurgy followed for high grade copper ore. So a lot of energy is involved during heating, and then lot of gases are evolved, and a lot of slag is produced. So a lot of energy and money are invested in high grade copper ore, but it is compromisable, because the ore we are getting is pure high grade ore. In that way, we will get a good quality copper. So the money which we are investing will be taken back. But the same pyrometallurgy process cannot be followed in low grade copper ore, because the ore, the purity or material which we get by spending lot of energy is cannot be compromised. In that way, they go for hydrometallurgical process, where the wet chemical methods are approached for a low grade copper ore metallurgy, where the first step would be the leaching step, followed by the solvent extraction processes, The third step will be electrowinning process. And there is a basic difference between the electrowinning process followed here and the electrorefining process followed in pyrometallurgy. I will tell about the difference in few subsequent slides. So the first step would be leaching, and the nature of leaching will be decided based on the uh, nature of ore site where they are getting the ore. For instance, when the ore is removed, low grade ore is removed, it will be stored as a large heap in outside the mining site. So what they do is they form some hole at the top of the heap and they use the leach solution. Basically, here they use sulfuric acid as the leach solution. So what it does is it will go to the top of the heap and then slowly with time it will percolate into the heap and then slowly it leaches out the copper and bring it to the solution form. So that means the ore form, which is in solid copper, will be leached out to the liquid phase and it is forming the pregnant solution. And the pregnant solution will be collected and it is processed for next step, that is solvent extraction processes. So heap leaching is followed for low grade ore. Sometimes what happens, it is very difficult to access the low grade ore area where mining and bringing out may not be economically feasible. In that case, in situ leaching is followed. In situ leaching is where what they do is by using explosives or something, they fracture the site and then they pump in the sulfuric acid. So instead of percolation, it will be pumped inside and then it will go inside the regions where the ore is present and then it is collected in some sort of tank. Then it will go for the processing of solvent extraction. So in that way, based on the economics or the availability of ore site and accessibility, the leaching methodology or leaching nature is decided. So after leaching, the next step would be solvent extraction. And here actually lixivian solution is something but solution which will leach out the ore. So by solvent extraction process, the pregnant solution is processed. And I'll just have a word about the solvent extraction. What is solvent extraction? Those are. So solvent extraction is nothing but you consider a metal. So it has different solubility in different liquids. Suppose, for example, you have an organic liquid and you have an aqueous liquid. This is water-based system. So organic can be considered like an oil and aqueous can be considered like water. So oil and water don't mix. But when you add a metal, the metal may have some preference to come into the organic phase. That means you add many impurity in the metal. By selectively tuning the structure or the component in the organic phase, you can selectively take one metal or the metal of our interest into the organic phase. So that means the pregnant solution which you have may contain other impurities along with copper. But by designing the organic component, by what chemical you are using, you can selectively remove only the copper into the organic phase. That means the impurity stays in the aqueous phase and only the element of our interest which need to be separated. Here it is copper, that will go to the organic phase. So this is basically done by mere mixing. So what you do is take the pregnant solution, add the organic, just to shake it and you leave it for some time, it will settle down. So before shaking, your element of interest copper will be in the aqueous phase, that means in the pregnant solution. So after mixing, there is exchange of copper to the organic phase, and by that way your organic solution will be fully loaded with copper. Now what they do is physical separation of both the phase. So your organic will be separated, which has extract phase which is containing copper, and then the raffinate phase which has impurities. So in that way your organic is fully loaded with copper. Now the step is repeated again. This step is called extraction step, where the copper is extracted into the organic phase and it comes back. Now there is another similar step called stripping. Stripping is nothing but you shake the organic phase with another aqueous phase such that the extracted copper will come down to aqueous phase. So that means whatever pure copper that is extracted here, that is again added with some aqueous and shaken well. So that means the extracted copper now strips back to the aqueous phase. In that way, you get a aqueous system or water-based system, which is pure metal. So impure metal, the organic will extract the copper pure, and then during stripping, the pure extracted copper will come back to the aqueous phase. So in that way, you are able to extract pure copper by solvent extraction technology. And when it comes to copper extraction, there is a particular extractant called, and there are several trade names based on the organic component that is present, and according to the concentration or impurity present, or what sort of medium, is it acidic or basic, or what is the nature of anion, is it sulfate medium, or is it chloride medium, or a nitrate medium, or phosphate medium, accordingly your organic is chosen, and then the solvent extraction system is carried out. One parameter which some parameters influence the extraction process, they accordingly your solvent is selected. One thing is percentage of extraction. For example, you want, there are sometimes apart from copper, there are some other element which is of our interest, like cobalt or nickel. So that time we may decide like we can co-extract two elements together and selectively strip one element. That time you can change the percentage of extractant. So accordingly, what metal you want to extract. So another parameter which influences the extraction of metal ion is pH, the concentration of feed, that is amount of the elements present in the feed, and then the temperature of the system. So these are the important parameters which decides the nature of extraction, what it extracts. Apart from these, there are some parameters like viscosity, density difference, which decides the kinetics part of the separation. For instance, if the viscosity is very high for the organic phase, the mixing may not be good. So in that way, the mass transfer of copper from aqueous phase to organic phase and stripping of copper from organic phase to aqueous phase will be very difficult. So in that case, viscosity is an important role which decides the kinetic or mass transfer, and then the density difference. So the separation is one of the important parameter which decides the poor efficiency of the solvent extraction process. When the density difference is high, the separation will be very fast and you can physically separate both the phases. But the density difference is very poor, there is a formation of emulsion or intermediate crud between the organic and aqueous phases. So that means between the crud, there is a loss of copper. So viscosity and density are some physical parameters which influence the separation, thereby the efficiency of the separation process. So in that way, the design of solvent and what sort of percentage you are using, what is the diluent you are using to dilute the extractant, these are the important parameters which play the role during solvent extraction processes. And this solvent extraction process has very high efficiency with the low energy given to just mix the system instead of high temperature employed. Apart from solvent extraction, there are some cases where when mine tailings has little amount of copper in ppb level or sub ppm level, ion exchange techniques are used. So this is used rarely and usually for mine tailings which has ppm level of copper in it. So after the separation of solvents by solvent extraction, the next step will be electrowinning process. In electrowinning process, what they do is the solution which is stripped back, which contains pure copper in solution form, is converted to a copper metal, and this is done by electrowinning process. And in electrowinning process, your anode is lead and then your cathode is copper. And there is a basic difference between electrowinning process and electro-refining process. In electro-refining process, your impure metal was used as anode, but here lead is used. But in electrowinning process, your metal ion is in solution form, but there it is in metal form, and there anode metal was there. But here in electrolyte or in solution, the metal was there. So in electro-refining process, metal goes from anode to cathode, but in electrowinning process, your metal goes from electrolyte or liquid phase to cathode. So this is a basic difference between electro-refining process and electrowinning process. Here the reaction, what happens is the reduction reaction, where the copper in the solution forms 2+ will be reduced to copper and gets deposited in the cathode. The anode, the reaction is quite different, where the water will be converted to oxygen and oxygen is bubbled out. So this is a reaction that happens in anode. So overall, finally, there will be the deposition of copper, and this pure copper can be separated. Okay, this is the basic difference between electrowinning and electro refining process. So next we will go to the non-ferrous metallurgy of aluminium. These are the typical aluminium ores which are generally available. The one is bauxite, corundum, feldspar, cryolite, alunite, and kaolinite. And bauxite is a very important ore in terms of Indian perspectives. And cryolite is one more important con. It is not available in plenty, but it is of important during processing of aluminum where cryolite is used. But if cryolite ore is not available, they will go for synthetic version of cryolite and use it for the processing of aluminum. The aluminum processing is mainly done by Hall-Herold's process, and there is a typical modification in the version of Hall-Herold's, and it is done as a Bayer process. The main drawback of this Hall-Herold's process is actually it is highly energy intensive. So, and high energy current, everything is used to carry out this reaction. So this drawback is circumvented by following Bayer's process. I'll just explain the Hall-Herold's process for the processing of aluminum ore. So what they do is aluminum is usually highly stable. That means it melts at above 2000 degrees Celsius. So that means in order to go by pyrometallurgy process, which we followed in copper, we need to spend even more lot of energy to follow pyrometallurgy part. So to avoid this, we are go by different technique where we dissolve alumina in or the bauxite ore in cryolite, which is Na3Al-F6. They will either use the cryolite mined from the ore, or if it is not available, they go for synthetic version of cryolite. So by dissolving the cryolite in bauxite and cryolite, you are able to reduce the melting point. That means around 100 degrees Celsius, you can carry out the reaction. That means you are reducing the temperature around half. So you can carry out the reaction in the presence of cryolite. So the reaction happens like this, where electrolytically when current is passed, high temperature around 1000 degrees Celsius, your molten mass is there, where your alumina will become aluminum metal at the cathode, and then the carbon will be oxidized as carbon dioxide at the anode. So as I mentioned you, this is actually an energy intensive process. But finally, whatever aluminum we are getting, that will be of high purity, like how you get in electrowinning as well as electro refining process. So that is the main advantage of this process. But somehow this is highly energy intensive material. So to avoid the energy input into the system, they do slight modification in this process, and they follow Bayer process. In Bayer process, what they do is they do pressure leaching of ore. So the pressure leaching takes the advantage of dissolving aluminium into from bauxite to the solution phase, but at around 170 to 200 degrees Celsius. So this doesn't require any high temperature of 1000 degrees Celsius. In that way, the energy consumed or money invested for carrying the reaction at a high temperature can be saved by the Bayer's process. But in Bayer's process, there is one more problem. There is something called red mud, which is after filtering the aluminium rich solution, you get some red mass, which is called as red mud. This is actually a potential hazardous material which has a lot of other materials which need disposal. A lot of research is going on in terms of how to treat this red mud or convert this red mud to a value added product. So this is one of the challenging problem in terms of Bayer's process where red mud is formed. And after the leaching of the bauxite ore, the aluminum oxide will be converted to aluminum hydroxide in soluble form, and then the impurities are in a solid phase and they are filtered. So after filtering the liquid phase, water is added, and you will convert that to aluminum hydroxide. So after that, the alumina is produced in rotary kiln around 1200 degrees Celsius, and this is actually pure alumina which will again go for Hall-Herold's process. So I have just summarized about the processing of copper and aluminum ores, and I will just highlight the general challenges which we face when we process the any non-ferrous material. The main thing is high energy consumption. That means you need to take the material to high temperature and then you process the system. So that means high money or cost is involved. So in order to avoid that, we should go for less energy intensive processes which does not consume much of temperature or energy we need to supply should not be supplied. The other thing is leaching. Generally, sulfuric acid or other acids are used for leaching or process the ores. So in that way, the acid is consumed more. The another problem with acid consumption is the byproducts which are formed usually are SO2, NO2, N2O or NOx gases, which are not environment friendly. So in that way, these products are these byproducts are not good for the environment. The second thing is corrosion. The problem is apart from attacking the ore, there are possibilities that it will corrode the vessel or the system in which the ore is contained. So this is the problem because there is no selectivity for the leaching agent. So it leaches everything in the system. So if you can have a system which can improve the selectivity, in that way you can leach only the ore and leave behind the vessel, you can improve the metallurgy part. So second thing is environmental aspect, like the water is polluted or air is polluted, so or soil is polluted. So we need to look into the leaching or metallurgy of the materials which doesn't involve any hazardous material, and simply we use green materials, which means energy friendly or eco friendly, at the same time efficient material. So these are the challenges which we are facing currently, and these challenges can be circumvented by following some of these solutions. And currently people are working on some of the materials which would provide the solution for these kind of challenges. The one probable candidate is ionic liquid. The other one is deep eutectic solvents. So using ionic liquids and deep eutectic solvents along the various processes which we follow in hydrometallurgy or pyrometallurgy. For example, during electro refining, we use solvents, electrolyte. So they can be replaced by ionic liquids or deep eutectic solvents. Or during leaching, we can use these kind of components which has selectivity as well as they leach the solution. And they have some added advantages also, which I'll be discussing subsequent slides. So after this slide, I'll be telling something more about the principles involved. So little bit it might be deviating from the metallurgy part. So I will go little slowly during these discussions. The first thing would be ionic liquids. So some of us might have heard of ionic liquids. 2-3 decades actually, these ionic liquid based research is in progress, where it can be divided into two words: ionic or liquids. Ionic liquids, that means liquids that are in ion form. Suppose you take sodium chloride, Na plus Cl minus. They are ions but they are in solid form. So when you replace either Na plus ion or Cl minus ion with organic molecules that I have mentioned here, that means you take Na plus and put one cation, organic cation, or you put Cl minus and put an anion. So that combination is called as ionic liquid. The beauty of this system is NaCl will be solid at room temperature, but when you replace one cation or anion with organic molecule, they become liquid. So that means whatever inert property you have with NaCl, the same inert property can be utilized in metallurgy system, where it can be used as electrolyte. Sometimes they can be made reactive and they can be used for solvent extraction processes. So those things I'll be discussing. So generally these ionic liquids are liquid at around room temperature or close to room temperature or around 100 degrees Celsius, and at least one will be organic in nature, like Na plus and Cl minus. Na plus can be replaced by an organic cation, or Cl minus can be replaced by an organic anion, or it can be both. you can replace Na plus and Cl minus, both the inorganic ions, by organic ions. So in that way, you can prepare an ionic liquid, and they are ionic in nature. Generally, when you take an organic compound, they have mostly van der Waals interaction, covalent bonds, those all. Here, they are ionic in nature, and there is something called delocalized charge. That means you take a charge, which is a cation here. This is not localized to a particular atom. It is just moving around several atoms. That means the charge is not localized. In that way, the crystal structure is less stable. That's why they are not in solid state and they are becoming liquid. Due to the less crystal stability, they are actually in a liquid form at room temperature. Okay, but the very important thing about ionic liquid is it is something called designer solvent. That means you can fine tune lot of parameters and you can fit into the property which you want. So that means you can design these materials such that it can be suitable for your application. For example, you take NaCl. The sodium chloride has a fixed melting point, fixed boiling point, everything is fixed. But when you change the Na plus and Cl minus by organic cation, you can change a lot of parameters. I will just explain in detail. So I am taking one example of ionic liquid. This is actually generally organic molecules are large molecules. This name is 1-butyl dimethyl imidazolium chloride. It is shortly named as BMM chloride, BMIMCl. So this is the molecular structure of this ionic liquid. So basically these are the parameters which can be changed. For example, number of carbon atoms. So this is the main chain which you have. In the main chain, there are 5 carbon atoms. So you can change the number of carbon atoms. You can make it to 6 or even 7 or 4 or 3. So this is one parameter which you can change. The second thing is heteroatom. Generally carbon, apart from carbon, any element is present, that is called heteroatom. Here in first position nitrogen is there, in third position nitrogen is there. So nitrogen is the heteroatom that is used. Apart from nitrogen, you can also use oxygen, sulfur, and other elements also. So that means you have several number of heteroatoms, and apart from one, here there are two heteroatoms. In that way, you can put 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 based on number. It complexity or difference changes. Another parameter which you can change is aromaticity. Here actually, if you remove the CH3 and put a benzene ring, you can make it aromatic. So when you substitute another benzene ring here, you have two aromatic group. So that means you can change the aromatic group. This is one of the parameter which can be changed. The fourth one is substituent. So if you take the main chain, center group, there are 5 substituents. First group is substituted by CH3. Second one, nothing is there. That means hydrogen is there. Third one is substituted by a butyl group. Fourth one and fifth one are free. So that means this is substituted by 2 substituents. But at the same time, you can make all the 5 substituents changing. So this is one of the parameter which can be changed. There is something called electron delocalization. So like in previous slide, how I have showed, this has 2 lone pair of electron. There is a double bond here. So there is a chance that the movement of electron can be different. So in that way, you can delocalize the electron. So this is one of the parameter which can be changed. Here actually the cationic part is organic molecule and Cl minus is inorganic part. You can make the anionic part as an organic molecule and this part as a normal cation, or both you can change as organic molecule. So this is one of the parameters. So that means you can change the number of atoms, you can change the heteroatom, you can change the aromaticity, you can change the substituent, you can change the delocalization of electron, you can change the ionic or cationic part of the ionic liquid. So in that way, there are several parameters which can play around and you can arrive at several properties. For example, you can fine tune the solubility of particular element into that particular ionic liquid. Like suppose I want to selectively leach only copper. I can design the molecule of ionic liquid and put it in the ore such that it only leaches the copper or the element of required interest. So that means in terms of selective leaching, ionic liquids play a very important role. And the viscosity of these materials can be changed, and also the density of these materials. So in that way, these two parameters highly influence the solvent extraction system. So in that way, the designing of these molecules can be made such that it suits the viscosity or density difference of the solvent extraction system. And then the conductivity, the ionic conductivity of these materials can be fine-tuned. And in that way, this is influenced highly by electrowinning or electro-refining processes. And there's something called electrochemical window. The electrochemical window is nothing but the voltage range within which your electrolyte does not decompose. So even though a oxidation or reduction reaction takes place at very high voltage range, we cannot apply that voltage. If you apply that voltage, the electrolyte will decompose. So typically around 3 voltage will be the electrochemical window of conventional inorganic electrochemical system. When you come to electrochemical window of ionic liquids, it is minimum, it will be 4 volt or above 4 volt. That means you have flexibility of using higher voltage and get better output. So in that way, using the ionic liquid in selective leaching or solvent extraction process or electrowinning or electro-refining processes would be of paramount importance. In that way, several research activities or recent trends are going on in terms of ionic liquids. So these are some of the potentials of ionic liquid to highlight, where they are liquid at room temperature. So that means there is no need to give extra energy to melt the material to the room temperature to melt the material. So you can carry out the process at the room temperature itself, and there is low vapor pressure because they are ionic in nature. They give very less vapor pressure. That means there is very less amount of solvent loss if you use ionic liquids as solvent. So that means you are able to save the solvents and you can reuse it again and again. So this is one important point. And they are less combustible. That means less fire hazard in terms of industrial safety point of view. And there are several processes which takes place at very high temperature. Under at that temperature, your material can decompose. Since they have high stability and less combustible, you can go for exothermic reactions also. And they have very larger electrochemical window. So in that way, the electrochemical stability can be improved. And then they have very high conductivity. That means the mass transfer or kinetics or transport properties can be improved when you use uh, uh, highly ionically conducting ionic liquids. And overall, what you can say is the ionic liquids are highly stable and very less vapor pressure and less combustible. They can be reused again. But in the case of conventional leaching agents, they will be converted to some other form, and getting that back again will be a very energy intensive one. So in that way, the ionic liquids can be reusable by adding some other minor components, and you can recover the ionic liquids and reuse. So in that way, they are good reusable in nature. The second thing is green nature. So most of the solvents or materials or leachants which you use in our metallurgy processes are hazardous, will give out lot of unwanted gases. But most of these materials are highly stable, reusable, and they don't give any other unwanted gases. In that way, they are something called green compounds. Like there are some 12 principles of green nature. So some 4 5 important points it will address. So it can be reusable, it has low vapor pressure. These are the components of green nature. That means these are eco-friendly components, these ionic liquids. In that way, they have heavy potential in the several metallurgy processes. So these are some of the research highlights which I want to mention, which is going on in terms of ionic liquids. This is a review paper, the paper on which summarizes about the application of ionic liquids in hydrometallurgy processes like solvent extraction or ion exchange or any leaching. And some people have tried to extract gold from the using ionic liquid. So when you think of gold leaching, they used cyanide based compounds which are highly toxic. So that means apart from leaching, the treatment of residual cyanide is another burden for the industry. The post treatment is another burden. So when you replace that by eco-friendly ionic liquid, the money invested or the energy input given for the processing of effluent can be reduced. In another place, they have tried ionic liquid for leaching a copper-based ore, and they have also tried some ionic liquids for aluminum production. So these are some of the highlights about ionic liquids used in non-ferrous metallurgy. But there are two limitations. One thing is the ionic liquids are have poor synthesis. For example, any organic compounds, there will be multiple side products formation. In that way, the production of ionic liquids with high yield is quite challenging. So this is one of the demerits of ionic liquid part. The second thing is synthesis route and separation will be little costly, but this can be overcome by the reusability. Like it's like initial investment, but later on you can reuse it, so you can save the reinvestment cost. So that is one thing. But still there are some scope of using liquid in day-to-day life metallurgy practices. But there are some alternatives for ionic liquids also. The main drawback is yield and cost. This can be circumvented by using deep eutectic solvents. So basically, as we know that eutectic solvent is something like you take two components and mix each other. The melting point of the component mixture is something low. That is a eutectic solvent. For example, you take a choline chloride, which is one component, or urea, that is another component. So the melting point of first one is 300 degree. The urea is actually 133 degree. But however, when you mix urea and choline chloride in the particular ratio, they will form a eutectic mixture, which is actually melting at 12 degree. So that means these two are individually a solid material in room temperature, but when you mix, melt and leave it, it forms a liquid component at room temperature. So that means whatever property we expected in ionic liquid, the similar thing can be obtained when you use eutectic solvents. And deep eutectic solvent is nothing but when you use a Lewis acid or something like electron accepting compound in combination with the electron donating compound, you get a deep eutectic solvent. And these kind of components are also in hot topic of research along with ionic liquids, where you can use the eutectic mixtures as alternate for ionic liquid as a low temperature, low cost alternative, but also they are very efficient as compared to ionic liquids. So deep eutectic solvent is also another area of research which is recently taken up and work is going on. So this work highlights about the separation of aluminum from spent lithium ion batteries. And this work is about the separation of lead, cobalt, nickel, and manganese, other materials, pre-concentration of these materials. And this work highlights about the application of eutectics during for metal separation and valorization. So these are some of the research highlights I have shown you, which was worked on deep eutectic solvents. Uh, then I will tell something about solvator metallurgy process. Actually, any system you use, we go for solvent extraction system or some pyrometallurgy or separate processes. But this solvator metallurgy process is a combination of two processes in a single system, where you use either ionic liquid or a deep eutectic solvents in such a way that they selectively leach out as well as they selectively extract the material. So that means it can be used for leaching as well as for solvent extraction. So that means together same component can be used. Thereby you are reducing the cost of putting another new component in a separate system. So these are some of the highlights which are of the work done on this route. So this is actually a very recent paper published in the year 2020, very recently, and this is a one which is recently accepted paper. So these are the very promising routes in which the process metallurgy of these kind of novel materials are used and are under in progress. But basic problem with these ionic liquids or deep eutectic system is they are in the rudimentary or starting stage of research. So a lot of things need to happen so that they can be implemented in a large scale with a commercial value. So these are all actually done in a batch scale. So in that way, scaling up or doing pilot plant or what are the problems associated, solving those all will be hot is a reason one which can be taken up. So I would like to conclude my talk by saying that these non-ferrous metals are used in every walks of life, and they are very indispensable. In that way, the process metallurgy of these metals are very important. And then these process metallurgy route is highly energy intensive, and that need to be replaced by less intensive materials, and several research work is in progress in order to address this and to get the efficient, eco-friendly, and economical process metallurgy use. So thank you, one and all. So I take this opportunity to thank the management of OBJU University, and I thank all the participants and organizers of the team. And special thanks to Mr. Dr. Kalyan Fani for considering me, proposing my name for this talk. And thank you for the committee for accepting this proposal and allowing me to present my work. And I thank our Institute Director, Dr. S.S. Basu, for presenting my thoughts on this topic. Thank you, Madam.